In this video I'm going to talk about making true grayscale vector images in Illustrator. So we've already talked about RGB and CMYK, and let's say I've got this logo, and I also make a CMYK version for print. So I'm not going to click on that because it won't really add anything to the demo. So let's say I already have these two versions. And then my client says, well, we want to run some ads in a local paper, and the ad section is only black and white. So we need a true grayscale image because that's only printed with black ink. So I'm not just going to go through and make all of these pieces look black and white because this is still an RGB file. So if this is going to be printed, the best way to go about it is to go to CMYK first, and then Illustrator can force the colors over if you've got a lot of them. However, you should really look at them carefully and make sure that they've got the right amount of contrast. So just as in Photoshop, you always want to have a hand in this. You don't want to just force the file to grayscale and then say, hey, that's fine. So I'm going to go back here. Now I've done kind of explaining what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go to File, Document Color Mode, CMYK. Or I could just open a CMYK version of my logo to start with. So if I have nothing selected, and I switch my color palette view to grayscale, I get a nice simple grayscale slider, but nothing happens. So I'm going to select all this again, and oops, undo there. So if I select everything first, if I know I just want everything black and all of this is fill and has no stroke, I could just click this black quick option here and then work with the grays from there. So if I have my basic swatches up, I can work with them that way. So I could go in and make the middle a bit lighter or whatever I needed to. So I went to CMYK first because that's printing language, and then I'm going to make the file only have gray in it. So I am going to make sure that the color formulas for that only have K in them and no numbers for the colors. So because Illustrator, unlike Photoshop, doesn't have, File, Document Color Mode, Grayscale, you're only doing it in swatches, we're going to get as close as we can with CMYK and then make sure that we don't actually put any color in there. So I'm going to stick to this row of swatches that only has grayscale. If you don't have these swatches, you can get them by clicking the library icon in the lower corner of your swatches panel, going to default swatches, and then choosing print. So I'm going to go put color back in here. Just going to choose some colors with some different values so we can see what happens. And this. Okay. So I made sure that this was ungrouped, because if it's grouped, if you had noticed this before, all these options were grayed out when I opened the side menu in a previous step. So I ungrouped it, but made sure I had all the items selected. So if they're selected now, and I change my color palette to grayscale, and show my options, you can see I get a slider just kind of where it was, and it's not really doing much. I'm going to go back to the CMYK view. And this likes to be grouped. Alright, we're just going to go with a white arrow. So if I select this shape and now change the color side menu to grayscale, it forces it to a gray of the same value. So I could go through these one by one. It doesn't like to do them together, as you saw. And when I'm done, I think the middle looks too dark, even though it forced it to whatever value I had in there. Because you don't have the hue of the color, the values are going to look different. I think this one's a little too dark. Let's make that a little bit lighter. So then I'm just going to click through each shape and make sure that it's indeed only on that K slider. I could also go to the CMYK version of the color palette, and if you click on something that's only grayscale, it jumps to just the grayscale view. So I'll do that one more time. So change that to CMYK, and when I click on a shape that's grayscale, it doesn't even show you the colors. So that lets me know that everything is grayscale. So it's a little bit more work to make sure that this file is indeed grayscale, because there isn't a color mode for grayscale in Illustrator, but it's definitely doable.